Hi, this is Paul from Paul 10 Economics Tutoring, and today we'll be talking about price ceiling and price floor. Now let's look at price ceiling first. Price ceiling is the maximum price set allowed to sell, right? So in this case, we have price ceiling set at this point. And as you can see at this point, demand is greater than supply. And that is one very important result of a price ceiling. That is, it leads to over demand. And another rule to remember is that price ceiling is always below the equilibrium price, right? Equilibrium price is here, price ceiling is here. And the reason for that is because if price ceiling is above the equilibrium price, then there's no point of setting it, right? The market will just transact at the equilibrium price, okay? Now, what would be an example of price ceiling? Well, medicine, right? Many of us, we get medicines for very cheap price, very low price. And the reason for that is because the price ceiling set on it by the government, right? So as we saw, price ceiling leads to over demand. So what do we do about it? Well, in reality, very often government is the one that makes up the difference, right? So you have your private suppliers supplying your Q ceiling amount, and then you have the government supplying the difference between your new equilibrium and your Q ceiling amount, right? So this part will be supplied by the government. And in graphs, we represent that by a parallel shift to the right of the supply curve. So it will come here, right? With a shift in supply curve, then at every price point, government is supplying more units. That way you come to a new equilibrium, which is here, where price ceiling crosses demand, okay? Now let's look at price floor. By the same logic, price floor is always above the equilibrium price because if it's below, there's no point of setting it. And price floor, a classical example of it will be minimum wage. Think about it. Without minimum wage, well, if this is wage, then without the price floor or without the minimum wage, people will be paid here, right? But then because of the minimum wage, then there's a gap between labor supply and labor demand. And it's very often, again, it is government that makes up this difference, right? By increasing demand to the right, okay? For example, government hiring, right? For example, government housing, or government projects that requires a lot of labor. It shifts demand or parallel shift demand from here to some point here. And it transacts at the new equilibrium, right? Where total supply equals to private demand plus government demand at the price floor price, okay? Now the problem or one issue with price ceiling and price floor is that it leads to deadweight loss. In the graph, we have a deadweight loss as an example of price ceiling, right? Because of price ceiling, only Q ceiling amount is transacted, which is lower than Q optimum, okay? And that leads to deadweight loss, represented by this yellow triangle, right? And it is called deadweight loss simply because it is just inefficiency of the society because we are not at the optimum equilibrium, okay? But this is pure economic thinking, right? Deadweight loss, we think of something as deadweight loss, it gives a connotation of that it being bad, but in reality, a lot of times we need these type of price floor and price ceiling. Just from a pure economic sense, it is deadweight loss, but from a, say, society welfare point of view, then it's actually good, right? So there you go. There's price ceiling and price floor. And one thing you always have to remember is that price floor always above equilibrium and price ceiling always below equilibrium. This is a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm sure you'll do well. Thank you. I hope we see you in the next video.